All right. Well, I think this is working. I'm going to hide this. All right. So I got the idea from this channel called Please Stop the Ride. It's really good. This is a great interview here. The new normal of agriculture and the great agricultural reset. A lot of stuff I didn't know about. So she had done this video like 4 months ago. And this is where I got the idea because here, Harvard has conveniently listed to us the roadmap to pandemic resilience, massive scale testing, tracing, and supported isolation, TTSI, as the path to pandemic resilience for a free society. So let's read a little bit of what these traders have in mind for us. This is totally a setup. Look at this. April 20th, 56-page document. This is interesting. Okay, so acknowledgments. Here is the list of traders to mankind. They're very proud of themselves. Danielle Allen, James Bryant Conant, University professor and director for the Ethics Center for Ethics at Harvard. Meredith Rosenthal, Chan School of Public Health. Rajiv Sethi, NFA Institute. Went to Columbia and Barnard College. I used to live up there. I was in Manhattan. Sharon Block, Harvard Law School. Joshua Cohen, MIT. Divya Siddharth, research fellow from Microsoft in India. Peter Eckersley, convener at stop-covid.tech. They just made that up in a couple of weeks, right? That's how fast, like we weren't even closed down for a month when this was published, right? Joshua Simmons at the Harvard, another Microsoft guy, M. Eifler, Ganesh Sitaraman from Vanderbilt Law, Lawrence Ghostin, Georgetown Law, Henry Slaughter, Princeton, Darshan Gu from the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, Allison Stanger, Santa Fe Institute, Six Heart. What is that? Okay, another person at Microsoft here, another trader from Microsoft. Alexei Tabarrok from George Mason, Zoe Hitzig, Lilia Tretikov from the United Nations, Microsoft, Harvard, Julius Krein from American Affairs, Evelyn Weil from Radical Exchange Foundation and Microsoft Office Technology, Chief of Technology Officer, political economist, and social technologist. Ted Nordhaus from the Breakthrough Institute and Microsoft Research in New York City, John Langford. It's nice that they listed them all. Here's all the people, another list, researchers at Morgan Stanley, all of these traders here to mankind. Thanks to the Rockefeller Foundation. Gosh, it's kind of amazing of all these conspiracy theories in one document. Many of the undersigned do not typically take institutional positions. Moreover, some may differ with aspects of the report and have stressed other matters of primary focus. But all have signed on as an urgent call to respond to a national crisis and have done so with the greatest sense of vital unity. Breakthrough Institute, National Domestic Workers Alliance, New America, the Niskanen Center, Radical Exchange Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Santa Fe Institute, Third Way, Ethics. Let's see how ethical these people are. And they made a correction at 6 a.m. because there was an error. The earlier version attributed to the Broad Institute, Cambridge, Massachusetts, estimates of a capacity to achieve 1 million tests per day. This was a reporting error. The correct information is that the Broad Institute, which analyzed 250,000 samples a day for the Human Genome Project, is a good example of the kind of lab that might be stood up to receive a capacity of 1 million tests per day. TTSI, testing, tracing, and supported isolation. Testing, spying, and concentration camps. Right? I have to do the translation here for you guys. At least it's my translation. COVID-19 is a profound threat to our democracy, comparable to the Great Depression and World War II. How do you know? We haven't even been in this for a month when this is printed, right? As ever, the greatest bulwark of democracy is us. Well, we don't have a democracy. We have a constitutional republic. I mean, I would think Harvard would get that right? Aren't they supposed to be smarter than the rest of us? What we do together for one another, and even more with one another, or more like to one another, to fight this terrible disease, protect human life, secure our institutions, and prevent the destruction of our economy will determine whether free societies will prove resilient in the face of existential emergency. What do you mean by existential here? Relating to existence, concerned with existence, especially human existence, as viewed in the theories of existentialism, implying or affirming the existence of a thing. Okay. What we need to do is much bigger than most people realize. We need to massively scale up testing, contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine together with providing the resources to make it possible for all individuals. Broad and rapid access to testing is vital for disease monitoring, rapid public health response, and disease control. We need to deliver 5 million tests per day by early June to deliver a safe social reopening. This number will need to increase over time, ideally by late July to 20 million a day to fully remobilize the economy. Who are these people telling us that we have to shut the economy down? Listen to this. This is crazy. We acknowledge that even this number may not be high enough to protect public health. In that considerably less likely eventuality, we will need to scale up testing much further. By the time we know if we need to do that, we would be in a better position to know how to do it. Between now and August, we should phase in economic mobilization in sync with growth in our capacity to provide sustainable, that evil word again, testing programs for mobilized sectors of the workforce. So how is throwing a bunch of freaking hypodermic needles and swabs and plastic into the landfills sustainable? How is that sustainable? Millions of tests a day, millions more packaging thrown away every day? Okay. The great value of this approach is it will prevent cycles of opening up and shutting down. Okay, yeah, right. Not preventing it because that's what they want. This policy roadmap lays out how massive testing plus contact tracing plus social isolation with strong social supports, or TTSI, can rebuild trust in our personal safety and the safety of those we love. I don't feel safe with people like this making decisions for me. This paper is designed to educate the American public about what is emerging as a consensus natural strategy. This is what I was talking about in that video I did about the fountainhead. Consensus. Everything is going to be shoved down your throat because other people will make it happen. The work has been produced in partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation and builds on important work already released by Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, the Duke Margolis Center for Public Health Policy, the Center for American Progress, which is George Soros. I used to work. They're located at 1333 H Street Northwest in Washington, D.C. I used to work on the second floor, and they were on the fourth floor. That's George Soros' organization. I used to wear my West Point jacket around to piss them off. Key points in this roadmap include the level of testing and supported isolation. To succeed, isolation must be supported with job protections, resource support, and health care. Testing and public health response in programs established by states and administered by local health authorities can and should be fully aligned with civil liberties, due process, non-discrimination, data, okay, and health privacy concerns and health ethics. Well, all of those have been infringed upon. I'm not even allowed to see the doctor unless I wear a mask. And I haven't. The Pandemic Testing Board, set up by the federal government with strong but narrow powers, that has the job of securing the testing supply and the infrastructure necessary for deployment of testing. Federal and state guidance for state testing programs that accord with due process, civil liberties, equal protection, non-discrimination, and privacy standards. How can you have privacy standards when they're testing your DNA constantly over the year and tracking you on your phone? What kind of privacy is that? Is some sort of backwards, upside down reality we're going to be living in? Readiness frameworks to support local health leaders, mayors, tribal leaders, and other public officials in setting up test administration processes and isolation support resources. So they want people, they want your neighbor involved in this. They want your church, right? They want everyone, they want the lower level people enforcing this. Organization innovation on local level, cities, counties, and health districts with specifics varying from state to state. Federal and state investment in contact tracing personnel, starting with an investment in 100,000 personnel. Recommendation from JHU Center for Health Screening. 100,000 spies. Probably not going to be enough, but I guess they're working on it. Clear mechanisms and norms of governance and enforcement around the design and use of peer-to-peer warning apps, including maximum privacy protection, that word again, availability of open source code for independent and regulatory audit, and prohibitions on the use of any data from these apps for commercial purposes, ideally achieved through preemptive legislation. If I had privacy, you wouldn't be wanting to stick a fucking swab up my nose every freaking month to test my DNA and see if it's working, if your vaccines are working. Support for quarantine isolation in the form of jobs protections and material support, which means they're going to not let you work. Material support for time in quarantine and isolation, as well as healthcare. So this is how they will be putting you in your little concentration camp, right? Saying that you're sick and that you must be quarantined and you're not a good girl and you're not following orders. So we're going to we're going to isolate you for your own good. Expanded U.S. Public Health Service Corps and Medical or Health Reserves Corps paid service roles, and addition of Health Reserves Corps to the National Guard units of each state. So there we go. We got a new part of the military that will be enforcing this. National Infectious Disease Forecasting Center to modernize disease trafficking. Recommendation from Scott Gottlieb, AEI. They're very proud of themselves, aren't they? Consensus is emerging. The time for action. Yeah, the time for us to not put up with this nonsense and to not follow orders, because we'll never get out of this if we let this happen. So we already said that it's a profound threat to the democracy, which we don't actually have a democracy, in certain respects comparable to the Great Depression and requiring levels of public-private coordination last seen in World War II. If we rely on collective social distancing alone to tide us over until a vaccine is available, the economy will be shut down off and on for 12 to 18 months, costing trillions of dollars. Now remember, they're telling you this in April. So are they just psychics, or did they plan this? We can instead fully restart the economy by August. Oh yeah, okay, this is now October, through a program of massive investment in public health infrastructure, especially diagnostic and serological testing, combined with effective contact tracing and warning programs and supported individual quarantine and or isolation. These tracing and warning programs might be manual only or manual with opt-in digital supports or fully hybrid. Yeah, it'll be both. You'll have people, boots on the ground following you, and you will also be being spied on through all of your devices. We estimate that steady state testing levels that would permit replacing collective stay at home orders as the main tool for disease control with the testing, tracing, and warning supported isolation or TTSI methodology will eventually need to reach a capacity to test 2 to 6% of the population per day, or between 5 and 20 million people per day. So, what they're referring to with World War II is how, we ramped up production of weapons and food rations for the soldiers. So they're going to be ramping up the testing, right? They're going to make a lot of money. All these folks that are in the government are all invested in the vaccines. And if you guys aren't invested in vaccines and stuff yet, you should be. But the cost of such testing and tracing, or TTSI program, $50 to $30 billion over 2 years, is dwarfed by the economic cost of continued collective quarantine of 100 to 350 billion a month. See, they knew what they were doing. Achieve these ambitious aims while protecting civil liberties, justice, and constitutional democracy. It's impossible. You've already violated all of our rights: First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Second Amendment, 14th Amendment, across the board. Patients' Bill of Rights, you violated that. You violated the Civil Rights Act. You've also violated the ADA, period. Lays out the phased sectoral approach for mobilizing the economy for pandemic resilience, beginning with essential workers, charts of the specific responsibilities for such a plan of the different tiers of our federal system. It lays out the roles for business, lays out the roles for workers, and lays out the roles for civil society, endorses key proposals from other policy groups. We recommend a level of TTSI ambitious enough to replace collective quarantine as a tool of disease control. TTSI should replace stay at home. You know what should replace any of this is not following orders, okay? This is total bullshit. In addition, we endorse the recommendations of the Duke Margolis report on disease surveillance, the recommendations of the Johns Hopkins University Center for Health Security on investing in massively scaling up the nation's contact tracing personnel, and the recommendations of the McChrystal Group on innovating organizationally at the local level. Yeah, they want your local person, like your local priest, your local sheriff, or whatever, enforcing this. To defeat COVID-19, we must rapidly decelerate the pace of viral transmission. Well, then stop paying hospitals for saying people have it. How about that? They keep saying protect protect civil liberties, justice, and constitutional democracy. You guys don't give a damn about the Constitution, or you wouldn't be doing any of this. Where in the Constitution does it say you have the right to test my DNA every couple of weeks? To inject me with something I don't want to be injected with? And to stop me from shopping unless I cover my face like I'm some sort of, what do you call it, hypochondriac Muslim. In the absence of a vaccine, and given the profound economic costs and harms to civil liberties, justice, and constitutional democracy of indefinite, long-term, and/or repeated applications of mass social distancing orders, we need to develop alternative approaches to deceleration and disease suppression. More specifically, we need to invest in the infrastructure of pandemic resilience, the tools that will permit a society to control a highly infectious disease while preserving essential public institutions, mobilizing the economy to provide surge capacity to fight the disease, and keeping the rest of the economy maximally open. The Public Health Toolkit uses testing in 4 ways for infectious diseases. First, therapeutically as a diagnostic tool. Second, as a tool for finding cases and tracing known contacts, either by testing the symptomatic or testing more broadly, right? This is what all the cases are now, asymptomatic people. Third, in the form of sentinel testing, which has the purpose of discovering and tracking prevalence of disease and how it spreads in community settings. Sentinel testing sometimes, but does not always use random methods. Oh, so they'd be stopping you in your car or something? Is that what they're up to? And fourth, in the form of antibody testing to find immunity and the degree to which an infection has penetrated a community. So even if you have antibodies, you're also going to be on the list, you know? Great. As we consider massively scaling up COVID-19 testing to build TTSI programs whose purposes are intervention and disease control, the most important decision is the scale at which we test. What should the target be? There are 3 possibilities: broad quarantine, tests used for those who are symptomatic, and with reasons to presume exposure, healthcare workers. Their contacts are traced, symptomatic contacts are isolated, and asymptomatic contacts are quarantined but not tested. Okay, that sounds great. So if you have a wife that's a nurse and you don't have any symptoms, they're going to quarantine you anyways. Think about it. Targeted isolation. In this approach, tests are used for those who are symptomatic and those with reasons to presume exposure based on community spread, i.e., health workers, but also for all of their contacts, including asymptomatic contacts, so that COVID positive contacts can be isolated, but contacts who test negative do not have to be quarantined. Asymptomatic contacts who test negative on a first test would have to be tested multiple times over the course of the incubation period, but not necessarily to be quarantined. Alternatively, those individuals might choose to quarantine rather than to be tested. See, so you can't get out of it, right? One or the other, you either have to stay home because you're a dirty little evil human, or you can take our test 50,000 times. Universal testing. Diagnostic tests are used for those who are symptomatic, for those with reasons to presume exposure, blah, 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 and for symptomatic and asymptomatic contacts of those in the first 2 groups, but also in a broadly applicable mandatory employer, school, and benefits-based testing programs. This is what they really want, right? You can't get out of it. They want your employer to test, make sure that you have to be tested. Schools, if you're disabled like me, you won't get any money unless you're always getting tested, right? You won't be allowed to go to the VA. This is what's coming, y'all. You won't be able to get your welfare. You won't be able to get your Medicare, your Medicaid, your Social Security. Nothing is going to come to you unless you submit. We recommend using targeted isolation. Okay, sure. I believe you. We'll see how that goes. More specifically, an effective strategy of pandemic resilience requires a number of key elements: testing innovation, a national pandemic testing board to oversee supply and distribution. Boy, a lot of people are going to get rich off this, aren't they? This is going to be the only thing going. Like, there aren't going to be any industry besides this. Scalable manual contact tracing and warning methods. Peer-to-peer warning sharing apps. So you'll have an app on your phone. It just goes haywire whenever you get near someone who has tested positive. Testing status certificate or card reading equipment. An expanded paid U.S. public health service. They already talked about this. Here we go. More about the spies, the local people, right? They want your freaking friends and neighbors and local community leaders to lead this. Massive testing is essential because it is more finely targeted, more of a precision device than a blunt instrument. Rather than giving an entire city a stay-at-home order of indefinite duration, which is absolutely unconstitutional and unwarranted. Only those who are infected would need to stay home or in a medical facility, and only for a specific amount of time required by the course of the disease. This achieves the proportionality of response and clear time bounds that are among the basic criteria of appropriate use of quarantine authorities. I mean, they still haven't isolated COVID-19, right? Still, because it doesn't exist. All of these freaking flu numbers have always been fake, okay? They faked the swine flu pandemic. They have always counted all pneumonia deaths in flu deaths in order to sell you vaccines. That's what this is about. Oh, they're kind of repeating themselves. 2 to 6% of the population per day. So that's 5 to 20 million people every day have to be tested. This will be coupled with careful monitoring of rates of transmission and prevalence. If TTSI interventions at this level do not succeed, and we have not developed capacity to test broadly and at much higher levels in work and school community center, i.e. 30 to 100 million a day. I mean, if you were testing 100 million people a day, right, there's what, 350 million people in America? So what, you're getting tested like every third and a half day in America? Is that what they want? Is that what they're saying? So like you got to go in every Wednesday and every Saturday over and over again to be tested? You got to basically what, walk up to a building. I guess that's what they'll do, walk up to a building and stick a swab in your nose and test it right there eventually every freaking time you go anywhere. Testing programs would use both PCR tests, which is not a test for anything. It's an amplification method to identify the presence of the virus. See, I used to run PCR quote unquote tests. And what PCR is you are copying the DNA in the genetic material that is like on the swab. So it's very helpful. Say if you have a rape case and you don't have a big sample, right? You only have like a few cells of sperm or something like that. So you run that through the PCR and you've copied it millions of times. So how does a swab that you stick up your nose tell you that you have an infection? Say you do have, what if you do have this supposed RNA strand that they say is COVID-19? Your nose is lined with hairs and also mucus to trap anything, any kind of bacteria, fungi, dirt, whatever, so it won't get into your bloodstream and so it won't get into your lungs. So even if you did have it up there when someone sticks a swab up your nose, that does not mean that you are infected, right? Think about it. Deploy PCR testing broadly. Yeah, you're applying it broadly. Even Kary Mullis, who invented it, said it shouldn't be used as a diagnostic test. Look it up. In addition, testing to determine who needs to be isolated while also allows public authorities to say who can safely move about. Yes, you can tell you where you can go, who you can see, and that's not a violation of any of your rights. Those who have been tested negative within a very recent window and those who show immunity in reliable antibody tests should be free to return to work. Oh, thank you. Certificates of immunity should be used only in contexts where people have equal access to PCR testing and where a recent negative test result on a PCR test provides the same access to mobility as immunity. Any other use of immunity certificates would be likely to violate constitutional equal protection requirements. Yeah, all of this violates our constitutional rights. You would think Harvard would know that. Harvard, Georgetown Law, and you can't even read the freaking Constitution. You're just, I have no respect for these people anymore. None. Absolutely none. Where in the Constitution it says you can pull some shit like this? Achieving a testing program at this scale requires supply chain management and production capacity to deliver 5 to 20 million tests per day. And the distribution. This is so, and like their favorite word, sustainable, right? You're going to have to be taking all these deliveries to the local level, combination of local healthcare workers and service corps members, right? The military, reinforced by state and national service corps, like entities, medical reserves, U.S. Public Health Service Corps, the National Guard, and during the period of emergency, AmeriCorps and the Service Alliance. The new service corps, the service corps would need to be expanded. Yeah, because we got to have the military involved. You are a bad boy or girl. The economy is hemorrhaging 100 billion to 350 billion per month, and this is they're telling you this right before they locked everyone down, because they know what they were doing. If this doesn't prove it was a setup, I don't know what will. This and that Klaus Schwab's book, COVID-19: The Great Reset. Pandemic testing abroad, yes, because the entire world has to be involved because there is a world government. Implementation of such complex supply chain at this speed requires tight coordination, most naturally facilitated by a pandemic testing board akin to the War Production Board that the United States created in World War II. Remember when they put all the Japanese in the camps? You think they won't do that now? You won't be going to the camp because you're Japanese. You'll be going to the camp because you're infected, right? Or because you don't believe in Hoaxid-19. This complex interconnecting system can be removed from many other parts of the mobilization, such as vaccinations, the supply of treatments and treatment equipment to hospitals, etc. This is in fact desirable as it allows great scope for innovation and experimentation. That's what they're doing on us, changing your RNA or DNA with mRNA vaccines. Pandemic Testing Board is going to have two things: Pandemic Testing Supply Initiative, Pandemic Testing Deployment Initiative, right? Supply and then distribute. Oh, look, Johns Hopkins is looking out for our health again, health security. Contact tracing approaches will need to be adapted to jurisdictions based on existing public health infrastructure. Scaling up should be managed by state and territorial public health departments, and local and tribal health departments should be involved to coordinate contact tracing activities in their jurisdictions. We would not want anyone to get out of the way, even if you're out on some freaking Indian reservation, right? Got to make sure the elders stick you in the ass with the vaccine. The goal is multi-agency and multi-sectoral coordinated approach. Yeah. Corporation of mayors, community leaders, and faith leaders, right? Because they get their 501c3, so they can't say no. Planning and discussion will maximize the ability of jurisdictions to successfully support contact tracing at the community level. With the goal of tracing every diagnosed case of COVID-19 in the U.S. and basing their estimates of the workforce needed on contact tracing programs for COVID-19 in other countries, the JHU team recommends that we at least start by adding, this is 100,000, like they said, across the United States. These contact traces would move among the hotspots. Now they'll probably do what they normally do and make sure that they keep people that know the neighborhood kind of away so that you would be more likely to turn on someone, you know. Peer-to-peer warning sharing apps. Possible to use Bluetooth or GPS-based opt-in and adequately privacy protecting app-based tools that permit peer-to-peer warnings to supplement manual contact tracing programs. Like I said before, beeping. if you come in contact with someone. Apps and accompanying support policies have recently been used to great effect in Taiwan and are proposed for adoption in several European countries. Yeah, like the one video I did on Health Passport Island, it's coming here to America, Italy, Germany, and also the African continent. It's coming, y'all. Optimally, more than 70% of the population would have these applications installed, although lower penetration could also be combined with other contact tracing interventions. One study estimates that 40% would be the minimum penetration required for the app to provide effective contact warning, while another study suggests 60 to 80% would be the minimum penetration required to be broadly effective. So, how would they get all these studies in like 2-3 weeks? This was published April 20th, right? So I heard about Hoaxid 19 in like the middle of March. So they got all these studies, right? They got them all done in a couple of weeks, right? It wasn't planned. In the US, 96% of Americans, excluding undocumented immigrants, own a cell phone of some kind, and 81% owns smartphones. Though not all are capable of running such technology, minimally viable Wi-Fi equipped cell phones or Bluetooth dongles should be made available through Medicare and Medicaid for those without phones. Remember, Obama phones chose to opt into the use of such programs. They plan this stuff. Think about it. At the time of writing, Apple and Google have announced joint initiative to enable peer-to-peer contact tracing apps with privacy protections. There's that word again. And a plan for scaling to a large fraction of the population very quickly. I bet you they do. Significant uncertainties remain, including successful integration with public health tracing, wide-scale adoption, and confirmation that Bluetooth proximity is relatively reliable. That's why they've been putting up all the 5G. Have you seen it? We believe the clear oversight regime must be developed for the design and deployment of this technology. Excuse me, y'all. With such a regime in place, we believe this initiative could deliver impactful results. Certificate of or card reading equipment. Testing programs, whether sectoral or universal, will need to provide those who are tested with medical records ID card that would be readable by employers, schools, and social service agencies. This is how they're bringing it down on you. You won't be able to work, go to school, get any sort of social programs. For those opting into app-based peer-to-peer contact warning programs, they might also carry the relevant medical records certificate on their phone. That's what I talked about with RockU, Passport Ireland, Health Passport Ireland. See Appendix C for preliminary sketch of how universal testing program might work at the local level and how such an ID card certification could operate. Expansion of the U.S. Public Health Service Corps and Medical Reserve into a broader health reserve corps. Yes, we need more spies. We just need. These corps can also support contact tracing because we need the military in our lives. We need them. Expand the number of healthline workers to expand. That's why they've been calling them frontline health workers, because they know they're going to basically make them into the military and they don't even know it. A high school education, in addition, for contact tracing personnel, a high school level education and just-in-time training and management can suffice. How do you know? We don't even know. You shouldn't even know what contact tracing is since this is April 20th. You shouldn't have even known what that is. Well, how is this word already made up? Partners in Health is currently using this approach in Massachusetts. Okay. But this wasn't planned. States, National Guard. Yeah, they're going to make this. This is going to be a pseudo-scientific. It's going to be a pseudo-scientific electronic feudal serfdom. That's what's going to happen. Disease monitoring infrastructure. All of this for the common cold. Disease surveillance. For instance, the CDC runs a system called ILINNet to track influenza patterns each year via flu tests. As proposed in the AEI Roadmap to Reopening and reaffirmed with the Duke Margolis report, we should establish a national infectious disease forecasting center and aim for standards of disease surveillance set by Singapore. Yeah, we want to. Don't they cane people over in Singapore? We should start by caning our politicians and everybody on this list who put this together. Those shorter or such longer term efforts should not distract existing agencies from focusing on the immediate threat. Yeah, the immediate threat seems to be our freedom to do anything. As we discuss when and how to reopen the economy, we miss a fundamental report. 40% of the economy is already open. According to the Department of Homeland Security, approximately 40% of the U.S. workforce is currently in essential services. Fortunately, this essential workforce has not been equipped with the resources needed for pandemic resistance. Yeah, because they're next. As a result, doctors and nurses have fallen ill. Yeah, everybody falls ill every year with the flu of some sort, or a cold almost. As a result, doctors and nurses have fallen ill, and 17% of the New York police force is sick or quarantined. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I was in New York City at the time. Nothing was going on besides us staying at home and everybody being scared of nothing. They were killing people by if you came in and you had some sort of pneumonia, they were killing people by basically intubating you, right? That's what they were doing, and they were getting 54 grand for it. And if you think that doctors and hospitals aren't evil, you haven't been to the hospital enough. You haven't been to the doctor enough. I'll just tell you that much. I've been hurt for 18 and a half years, and the amount of doctors that are good, I can count on one hand. One that actually give a damn. The rest of them are working for the insurance companies and they're big pharma drug pushers. Like, why aren't they speaking out about this? Our first priority for a massively scaled up pandemic testing program should be to stabilize the essential workforce. Yeah, of course. And also develop a reserve corps who fill in for essential workers who test positive for COVID-19 and require treatment and or isolation. See, all right, we need to find out what this isolation means to them, huh? All right, so this is just more robust data privacy standard. Okay, let me tell you something. My freaking robust privacy standards. Okay, how many times has the VA been hacked and my medical records been hacked? I don't know, probably 10 times at least that I can think of. How many times has USAA, which is like the military's bank, been hacked and I've been sent extra cards over the years? I have to cut up the old ones. At least 5 times that I can think of. Due process. Due process is what? You have the virus, therefore you have to be tested for it, right? That sounds prove it. Success in activating all tiers depends on distributed organizational structures that support successful flows of information both vertically and horizontally, as well as cross-agency co-development with decision for government leaders at local, metropolitan, region, or state level. Fussell, Keister, and Pellegrini. An organizational form known as Fusion Cell was used by U.S. Special Operations as led by General Stanley McChrystal in the fight against the network threat of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, may provide an illustrative model for interagency intergovernmental coordination. See Appendix C. We need to see Appendix C, obviously. Yeah, we want to, this is what I said before. There's the war on drugs, the war on poverty, the war on terror, and now there's a war on the virus. And these wars never end because it's a war on like an idea, it's a war on something that doesn't really exist, right? They just make it up all the time. The government runs the drugs. The Government puts people in poverty. Sectoral phasing. 6 intervals. Investigation of novel viruses, recognition of increased possibility of transmission, initiation of a pandemic through easy transmission, acceleration, deceleration, and finally, preparation for future waves as the virus acquires a seasonality. Yeah, so they already know that this is just going to stick around. They already know within a month. In the current COVID-19 pandemic, the United States is currently in an acceleration interval, and stay-at-home orders and advisories are aimed at decelerating the pandemic or flattening the curve. Yeah, flattening the curve means the bell curve, the middle, where most people live, the middle class, they're flattening you. If you're not already so poor that you're on the government's dole, or you're so rich that, you'll never be on the government's dole, if you're in the middle, you're done. That's what that was about. 40% of the workforce is currently in essential roles. 15% are needed to fill shortages in essential roles. 15% are in expanded definitions of essential roles. 10% are in none of these categories but cannot productively work at home. That's like your waiters and waitresses and bartenders. And 20% can productively work at home. So what? 40, 30, so 70, 10. Okay, so that's 100%. So they're going to get rid of at least 10% of us, right? Because those 10% can't work at home. Expand essential workforce. That's going to be the only job left. Extend and economic miserably from collective stay-at-home orders. You got to watch out for these essential workers who might be spreading the disease. Yeah, I mean, if this was real, why are they even allowed to go home? Shouldn't they be like quarantined at the hospital? Huh? Why was anyone allowed to go home? They should have shut the hospital down and put them on a cot and said, okay, we're going to do this, right? But they didn't, did they? Simultaneously retain non-essential workers to temporarily replace COVID-positive members of the essential workforce during the period of their treatment and or isolation. That should be great. We want someone who knows nothing about nursing in there, fiddling around with your intubation tubes, right? Sounds like a good plan. Control the disease with the essential workforce. Yeah, well, you should have left them home. You should have never let them go home. That's how you know it's not real, right? Like it's not, if it was real, why would they ever let them go home? Right? You'd have to go through that decon tent like you do in the army, and you have to be wearing a pro mask that seals to your face, right? Like, come on, man. Come on. If Warning is understaffed, has limited take-up, or runs into technical difficulties, the alternative would be reversion to collective social distancing again or fully random testing, whose requirements are generally independent of prevalence and require testing the entire population randomly about twice a week, requiring 36 million tests per day. What did I tell you earlier? I'm a fucking genius. Wednesday and Saturday, y'all, get ready. Include the vulnerable, of course, because we want to get rid of them first. Incarcerated people, unhoused, nursing homes. See? Oh, we want to take care of them and go down for a good dirt nap. Experiment with steady state testing and tracing protocols and certification infrastructure. Figure out how effective manual tracing and tech-based peer-to-peer warning regimes will be in practice. I am quite frankly looking forward to this guy that's going to follow me around and manually trace me. Maybe he'll be my boyfriend. See, I can tell someone I have a boyfriend finally. This guy keeps following me around. Improve standards of infection control. Workplaces will need to achieve new standards of hygiene and infection control. Myriad of approaches systemized by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and specific to each business sector could contribute to suppressing the risk of spread. Oh, yeah, let's get OSHA involved because they fine you thousands of dollars all the time. And people can call them on you and you get in big trouble. By the time phase one is complete, the essential workforce, which comprises about 40% of the population, so 60% of us are not essential, y'all. Just remember that. I think it's more like 95% of us aren't essential. Will be stably back at work with effective testing and disease control measures in place. They will be the foundation for the pandemic resilient economy. The next phase, phase two, builds on phase one to swiftly expand the set of people who are in the essential sectors and incorporate them into the rigorous testing and certification programs. Phase two will involve the expansion of the workforce in place from 40 to 70% of the population, thereby expanding the workforce by 75%. So, okay, maybe 25% of us aren't going to get a job, I guess, when it comes back, right? Address continued shortages in the essential sector. Yes, we have to have more military. Told you. Left, right, left. Expand definition of essential workers. Yes. More people want to feel loved and needed. Short-term essential workers. What will you give? What will you do to give your soul and oppress your fellow people, fellow mankind? Modify some social distancing practices. Limits on public gatherings of larger sizes will remain. Oh yeah. So, what was all of that about? Not infringing upon the Constitution? First Amendment right to assemble. Public transport will need to be modified and rethought, following the lead of Singapore, where more subway and bus vehicles are deployed along common routes to decrease the number of people in each vehicle, and density restrictions are enforced using a combination of physical barriers and point entry metering. Let me tell you something. If this were real, Singapore, China, Korea, Japan, New York City, any of these places that have these, I mean, when I was in the subway in New York City, I mean, sometimes you're so packed in, like you're right next to someone else. If this was real, right? If you could really have a flu that just goes out and kills everyone, we would have all been dead a long time ago. Oh my God, I can't believe people believe this. I'm just mind boggled. Phase three, end economic misery from collective stay-at-home orders. Yeah, see, they have to make economic misery so that you will accept this draconian testing, constant spying, constant, worrying about social distancing and oh, we're going to punish you with extreme social distancing. Phase three concerns the reentry of the 10% of workers who cannot productively work from home or have not reentered the workforce by the end of phase two, right? So if you're disabled, you're screwed and therefore currently facing economic hardship. So these workers are those in manufacturing of non-essential items, personal services, and so on. In addition, this phase concerned the integration into testing programs of vulnerable populations not participating in the formal economy, for instance, those with felony convictions, undocumented immigrants, and individuals receiving public benefits. Here we go again. Recruit trusted community organizations and social service agencies to administer testing programs for specific communities of need. Local testing and contact tracing and warning programs have long been in existence, particularly in relation to HIV, tuberculosis, measles, and syphilis. Remember what they did with syphilis? Oh, you guys. Tuskegee. Oh, I didn't spell it right. So, under the guise of giving health care to black sharecroppers, the government gave them syphilis and then watched them die, watched them infect their wives and children. In 1932, the Public Health Service, working with the Tuskegee Institute, began a study to record the natural history of syphilis in hopes of justifying a treatment program for blacks. It was called the Tuskegee Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis in the Negro Male. The study involved 600 black men, 399 with syphilis, and 201 who did not have the disease. The study was conducted without the benefit of the patient's informed consent. Researchers told the men would be treated for bad blood, a local term used to describe several ailments, including syphilis, anemia, and fatigue. What went wrong? July 1972, Associated Press story about the Tuskegee study caused a public outcry. Yeah, they got caught. That's what went wrong, right? The men were never given adequate treatment for their disease. Even when penicillin became the drug of choice in 1947, the researchers did not offer it to the subjects. They did the same thing in Guatemala. These are the people that we trust. We trust the government. They love us. They love us. Temporarily relax regulations to allow for necessary modifications to non-essential sectors. Oh, so you can deliver or at-home services. Okay, so you can change your entire life for this. Your restaurant is no longer restaurant. It's just a delivery service. I'm sure that was every restaurant owner's dream. Following phases 1 and 3, a total of 80% of the workers will have been mobilized. So what about the rest? Swiftly incorporate at-home workers into testing and certification regimes, allowing them to return to normal social life. There's nothing normal about having to be tested twice a week for some freaking cold. What's normal about that? Then we're going to reopen the schools. I think the schools should all be shut down because nobody seems to be able to read the Constitution anymore. Aggressive research and development. We're not anywhere near 40% of the workforce participating in TTSI. Shows you they mean to make it last 18 months, which kind of goes with what they say, right? 666, 18. Accelerate the production of therapeutics and vaccines. Yes. Jurisdictional responsibilities. Federal government. Disease surveillance. Maintain liquidity and fiscal viability. Oh, yeah, I'm sure they're going to do that. Government can always be trusted with finances. So they want the state government to design the principles for social distancing, travel restriction, and pandemic travel restriction. Like how in aligning with public health standards, equal protection standards, due process, non-discrimination, civil liberties, privacy protection, and labor protection standards. How can you do that when you are restricting people's travel and telling them they cannot be around other people and testing them every couple of times a week. This is crazy. Provide free access to testing and subsequently necessary medical treatment for hoaxed positive individuals for the first 80% of workers reintegrated into the economy. Workers with insurers to provide access for the final 20%. Yeah, we are going to pay for this. Those of us who have jobs still, we're going to have pay for anybody who doesn't. Wow. Tribal authorities and counties. They don't want these people on the reservation out of this, do they? Design and administer pandemic testing for their communities. Health surge capacity to treatment of the ill and provide support to the isolated. Yeah, they're going to come by with the military and check up on you. Via public health and clinical laboratories, collect and report up to the state and federal pandemic relevant data in support of the ongoing disease surveillance. I mean, they're just describing hell. Who knew that Hoaxid 19 was like the 19th level of Dante's Inferno of hell, right? Of purgatory. I was feeling like it was, though. Here's your chart. See how they got around with the whole thing that nobody's really dying of this? People are dying of their diseases that they had in the first place, like diabetes or heart disease. They call it cases. Yeah, I mean, this is just going to be constant. Like now you have on your phone, you get these beeps about like children being kidnapped, or you get the president sending you something like when Obama's in office. Now you're just going to be in constant stuff about beep, you're in the vicinity of someone who is infected with COVID. Beep, get away. I mean, this is crazy. Report to your local authority to be tested. Tight coordination with the White House. Yep. Just as business leaders played the central role creating and staffing the British Ministry of Production, though it was eventually under the sovereignty of the British Crown. No way. We believe progress here depends critically on the business taking a role. Yeah, of course. Antifa hasn't figured out who the fascists are, have they? Moron. As history has shown us, in wartime it is often necessary and expected that the private sector invest assets in efforts required by the public sector to help the public sector defend the infrastructure on which the profits of the private sector depend. With regards to the latter, trust in government in the United States is 15 points lower than trust in business, and trust in companies like Amazon, Disney, and Tesla are 30 or more points higher, and that's dumb. I'll tell you why. Because Amazon, Disney, Tesla, all of it is the government. The internet is the government. It always has been. The government is the ones who invested the money, right, from the taxpayers and created all of this. The government is a corporation. Look it up. The role of civil society. While China and Singapore have achieved disease control with draconian measures that interfere with basic rights, in the United States, we need to find ways to control the disease that respect and protect civil rights and civil liberties. Oh, I'm sure you care. Germany, South Korea, and Taiwan provide models that combine robust investment in health infrastructure and privacy protective approaches in contact tracing. Everything that they've been talking about is what they do in China already. WeChat, right? That's their Facebook. That's how they're doing the social credit score. That's how they're tracking everyone. This is like a whole big book of double speak, isn't it? It's disgusting. An important part of achieving solidarity flows from activating and expanding service commitments, the commitments of all of us to one another and constitutional democracy. Yeah, peer pressure. This is like they're basically establishing a big high school everywhere, right? Full of bullies. Indeed, in this is a moment where we might at last establish a universal expectation of service, calling upon millions of civilians in a scaled up, paid Health Reserve Corps and activating other service entities on behalf of Hoaxid 19 mobilization. A call for service in the United Kingdom yielded 750,000 volunteers in a matter of days. So many people want to spy. We too should recognize this is our moment to serve and each find the mission to which we've been called. Well, this is my mission, is exposing the bullshit. As long as I can sit upright, which may not be long, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call out this fucking nonsense and people need to wake up. This is just absolute hell that they're describing. Can you imagine having to go to the doctor and stand in a line 6 feet apart twice a week to get tested? Rapid diagnostic testing, we already talked about that. Syndromic testing, integration of test and trace into an enhanced national syndromic surveillance system. What's the DNA database that they use for crime? What's it called? I forget. So they're creating one of these. CODIS is what it's called. CODIS. CODIS. Interesting that it's just like COVID. Serological testing. Rapid response capacity for isolation, contact tracing, and quarantine. Isolate new cases. They recommended 666 a billion investment in hiring and training 100,000 new contact tracing personnel. That is a lot of money spread over 100,000 people. There's going to be a lot of freaking embezzlement there. Here we go again. The Crystal Group has given thought. See, we have all of these freaking traitorous generals, right? They're mostly trilateralists and Bilderbergers themselves, so they don't get up there. Has given thought on how to translate the fusion cell structure of the U.S. Special Military Operation in the fight against Al Qaeda in Iraq to fight against COVID-19. We endorse their fusion cell playbook and their argument that success in activating all tiers of our federal system depends on distributed organizational structures that support successful flows of information both vertically and horizontally, as well as cross-agency co-development and decision support for government leaders at local, metropolitan, regional, or state levels. So those of you who think that the military will not go against you, the military deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan without congressional or with Congress even declaring war. The war has never been declared. Conclusion. We have no time to waste. Yeah, we don't. And we could save our lives by not following this nonsense and not giving in, because this is going to be absolute hell. We have no civil liberties anymore. And we are not a democracy. I can't believe that freaking Harvard law people do not know this. I'm mind boggled. Yeah, they recommend testing twice a week is what's going to happen. That's what they want. And since this didn't happen by late July, because, there wasn't going to happen by late July because people still didn't believe in it. But I'll tell you what, it's going to be like cheese on a grater, right? Just grating us down. And people will be begging for the tests and the vaccine so they can go back to work so that they can feed their kids. Consensus is emerging about what we need. How to do it is beginning to come into view. The time for action has arrived. How many times do they say the same thing? Yep, we're going to work on the United States and offer exports to foreign countries that are facing shortages because we would not want anyone to be free. Yep, World War II, we keep talking about. The board would consist of no more than 9 members, of course, another number they like to use. Federalist model. Congress could pass a law authorizing the state to create an interstate compact. The lead states would select a board of no more than 9 members. Why not 8? Why not 2? Pass a law. I knew we were in trouble when Obamacare passed and the Supreme Court ruled that they could do it because we ceded our sovereignty of our bodies to the government in that one act, right? They are now in charge of your body and they can tell you what to eat now. They can tell you what vaccines you have to have. It's all coming. Cost for large-scale testing is projected to be $15 billion a month. You're already bankrupt. This shows you that money means nothing to them. Control is everything because they just create money out of nothing. Latent capacity, like LabCorp, Quest, and BioReference, latent capacity is present as long as there's sufficient demand signal to expand a better means to coordinate with the demand. Both swab and PPE production could be addressed by repurposing idle plant capacity. In the textile industry, in the first industry, and in the plants in Puerto Rico in the second. Yeah, they destroyed American textiles, and they started doing this under George Bush. Since these plants are idle, why not? 100,000 PCR tests a day. A single mega lab should be capable of handling. And what are they testing? Right? They're really testing if their experiment is working on you. And I need to do a video about the mRNA and vaccines, how they're going to change your immune system, supposedly. And I'm not really sure what they're up to, but I need to do some more studying about it. New capacity of this type is already coming online. A good example of elements for pace for establishing a new high throughput lab can be found in this account of the rapid transformation of the Broad Institute. March. Like they knew that they were going to do this, right? How would you know if this just came out, right? And they were blindsided with it, right? Like the story that they're telling us. Oh, we didn't know. Then how do they know all this? Los Alamos Natural Laboratories could also play a valuable role. The FDA granted EUA a first saliva kit on April 13th. Many companies, such as 23andMe, routinely collect samples with spit kits and can be obtained from generic suppliers. Also necessary with the validated at-home sample collection protocol using lower nasal and/or throat swabs that can be transported at ambient temperature to a central lab facility. For the last, the FDA must work with academic labs and entities like the Gates Foundation. Bill Gates loves me. Yeah. Use a viral inactivation buffer in the test tube collecting the saliva sample. Then the material is no longer a biological hazard for transport, right? How come there's masks everywhere on the streets just discarded if they're biohazards? Where are the biohazard containers? Why aren't there red containers everywhere? They were making 6 million nasal swabs already. Copon and Puritan. And there's all the different places that they'll put it. See, this is the thing that's been hurting everybody. These recommendations apply to swab-based specimen collection by healthcare providers and to the anterior nares, nasal, and mid-turbinate specimen collection on-site by self-collection. I used to do a lot of lab equipment from these guys. I built some chemical labs actually when I was in DC. They have all those monkey test cages and everything. I had to price all that. Vivarium is what they call them. Appendix C, this is what they reference up there a couple times. Key concepts for a universal testing program. Currently, 56% of American employers use drug testing programs in both pre-employment and random testing contexts. Employers or prospective employees can visit a number of available and certified drug testing facilities. Often urgent care facilities play this role. Yeah, they want to make sure you haven't been doing drugs. Now, they're going to do the same thing for you for HOAX 19. States have also pushed aggressively for drug testing for those receiving public assistance. This was blocked in 2003 Michigan Court of Appeals case. Marchwinski versus Howard ruled that tests are not allowable on the grounds that subjecting every welfare applicant in Michigan to a drug test without reason to believe that drugs were being used was unconstitutional. Between 2011 and 2014, however, 12 states passed legislation requiring drug testing, having designated design programs that complied with the standards set in Marchwinski. See, they don't care that it's not constitutional. They don't freaking care. The Constitution, they just like roll up and wipe their arse with it. There are important differences between drug testing and COVID-19 testing. Although the legal landscape is changing rapidly, drug testing can reveal behavior connected to illegal narcotics activities and generates stigmatizing associations with the individual tested in illegal activity. Nor is drug testing typically used to connect people to healthcare, though perhaps it should be. HOAX-19 testing, in contrast, has the goal of ensuring that all who need treatment for HOAX-19 receive it, and that those who are infectious without being symptomatic do not pass the virus on to others. This is just the dumbest. I can't believe scientists actually, yeah. The consequence of testing positive for HOAX-19 is not a no-hire decision or loss of employment. Oh, yeah? Indeed, this needs to be written into legislation for the program. Testing positive is instead a recommendation to isolate and or seek treatment for a 14 to 28 day period with job protection guarantees. Yeah, they're going to hire someone else while you're sitting at home twiddling your thumbs or out at an isolation camp. This is not to suggest that problems of stigma will not arise for HOXA-19 as they have for other diseases. Yeah, they still call people lepers hundreds and thousands of years later. Not a form of, okay, sure. Honestly, none of this testing, I don't agree with any of it. It's total bullshit. All of these quote unquote illegal narcotics are run by the government, right? We were protecting the poppy fields in Afghanistan. The CIA runs the cocaine. They run all of it. But it's illegal for you to do it, right? Okay. In relation to the contrast between drug testing and HOXA-19 testing, it is important to note that the appeals court basis for invalidating any effort to connect broad drug testing to provision of public health benefits does not pertain in the case of HOXA-19. The argument in the former case is that the state cannot require drug tests of public benefits recipients without reason to believe that drugs are being used, right? Probable freaking cause. But with HOXA-19, you don't have probable cause, right? You don't have to. Everyone, whether they're symptomatic or asymptomatic, has it. But with HOXA-19, the point of testing is precisely that we have a good reason to believe that any of us might be, in fact, carriers of the virus, even if we do not display symptoms. In other words, HOXA-19 testing should survive a Fourth Amendment challenge on probable cause grounds. Okay. None of this has been proven. You can't even prove that someone gave you HOXA-19. Prove it. Prove to me in a court of law that someone else gave anyone else flu ever in this world. Prove it. Prove to me that the strand of RNA or whatever that is in the body, that is in a deceased body, right? That the viral load report shows me that that specific virus of both people, that's killed them. Prove it. Show me. Bullshit. Oh, here we go. Local level pandemic testing programs can be built with similar structure to drug testing programs, drawing on the state's public authority to license, as in the instance of driving, but with a clear focus on the objective of providing health care to the tested individual as well as on protecting the health of the broader community. Employers, schools, and public assistance programs all have a reasonable basis on which to require tests, and the states could mandate that they do. Penalties for failure to test would fall on these individuals, these entities, not the individual. Similarly, local contact tracing programs have been long in existence. Yeah, they've been planning this for years, particularly in relation to HIV, tuberculosis, measles, and syphilis. A particularly good example is the program based in each of New York's boroughs, grouped under the title New York Knows. They know when you are sleeping, they know when you're awake, they know if you've been bad or good. These programs involve community organizations as partners in recruiting people to be tested and in conducting contact tracing subsequent to positive tests. They have set the goal of ensuring that every borough resident has an HIV test. Importantly, the motivation for contact tracing programs of these kind is the duty we all bear to warn others of their imminent danger, and if we learn of it, and if we have it within our power to warn them. Just disgusting. Here we go, talking about Trader McChrystal again. Under this organizational form, some 2,000 people came together every day on a common call to share information and under the centralized authority of McChrystal to ensure they had shared consciousness and a general plan. Yeah, Like again, the fountainhead, shared consciousness. Give everything over to this nonsense, to everyone else, and not have any life for yourself. Wow, listen to this. It should replace bilateral communication. So, for instance, rather than having chains of communication from states to counties, states to cities, federal health agency to tribal health authorities, federal health agency to state public health offices, and so on, each state might link all of these communications together in a daily call using a fusion cell structure. Yeah, so all the information would be going up all the time, and no one. Local level fusion cell participants would be empowered to implement shared policy goals emanating from aligned state and federal incident command systems, right? So they can really stick it to you down low. That's what they want. Without their structure being called a fusion cell, these local leaders have innovated the organizational direction described above to make contact tracing possible in their community. Yeah, they're going to set up the new NKVD. An excellent example of the relevant kind of coordination is already available in the collaboration between the City of Tyler, Texas, Smith County, and Northeast Texas Public Health District. Instead of having independent operations center for a crisis, the first time they have a joint operations center where municipal, county, and health district teams think and plan together. This partnership has permitted the county and health district officials to build out a contact tracing strategy using personnel redeployed from the municipal level, for instance, fire and police personnel and restaurant inspectors. The organization innovation has permitted a marriage built in hell of public health expertise with municipal resource capacity. So we're going to use the police and everyone else against you. Sick. Thank you, Harvard, for being a bunch of traitors fucks. All these people writing this stuff, right? They just already knew. March 27th, March 30th, March 21st, February 15th, April 6th, March 12th, April 3rd, March 23rd. This was planned long in advance, y'all. All right. I've about had it. This is about as much treason. Homeland Security Council 2006. Coronavirus disease in 2019. 2014. January 29th. I've had enough treason for today. Sickening.